A birthday gift cost me my entire family. One little tube of saliva, 25 years of lies. I was sitting at the Whitfield dining room table. It was my 25th birthday. The crystal chandelier was sparkling above us. Julian handed me a wrapped box. I tore off the paper. A 23andMe kit. The whole room erupted in laughter. Finally, we can prove you're adopted, Julian joked. Everyone laughed. Even Mom cracked a smile. But her eyes didn't match her mouth. You know how families have those inside jokes? The ones that feel funny, but also kind of sharp? This was one of those. I held up the little box. It was glossy white with bright orange text. Discover your DNA story, it read. Ha, very funny, I said, but secretly, I was kind of excited. I've always been curious about my ancestry. Have you ever taken one of those DNA tests? Everyone's doing them now, but in my family, that was apparently forbidden territory. Mom reached for her wine glass. Her knuckles were white. She was gripping it so hard I thought it might shatter. I think I'll pass, she said, her voice tight. The room went quiet. The laughter died instantly. I looked around the table. Julian's smile faded. Dad just kept cutting his steak. No one said anything for a solid 10 seconds. Suit yourself, I said, breaking the silence. I pushed the awkward moment away. I didn't want to ruin my birthday dinner. The dining room was beautiful as always. Tall windows draped in silk. Silver candlesticks. The smell of rosemary and prime rib. I took a photo with my iPhone. I didn't notice it then. But looking back now, I see it. Mom is looking away from the camera. Her hand is clenched around that wine glass like it's a life preserver. I can't wait to see my results, I said, tearing into the packaging. What if I'm related to royalty? Knowing our luck, you're probably related to a horse thief, Dad said. We all laughed again. The tension seemed to lift. I read through the instructions. Step 1, register your kit online. Step 2, spit in the tube until you reach the fill line. I'll help you, Julian offered. I want to know what diseases we might get. Shut up, I said, laughing. Like you tell me if you found out something bad. I can still picture it so clearly. The tube on the table. The little funnel. My family watching me. And this is where it gets really messed up. If I had known then what I know now, I would have burned that box. Mom stood up abruptly. I need to check on dessert, she announced. Her napkin fell to the floor. She didn't even pick it up. I watched her walk out of the room. She didn't look back. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. Something about the way she left felt wrong. It felt like she was running away. But from what? I wish I could go back to that moment. I would grab her arm. I would ask her what she was so afraid of. Instead, I just kept opening the kit. The tube was smaller than I expected. Clear plastic with a blue liquid at the bottom. A tiny funnel screwed onto the top. Make sure you don't eat or drink for 30 minutes, Julian read from the pamphlet. I hadn't eaten in 2 hours. I was ready. I'm doing it, I announced. Watch this. I put the funnel to my lips. I gathered up saliva. I let it drip into the tube. 1 drop. 2 drops. The blue liquid turned pink as it mixed. You look ridiculous, Julian said. Shut up. I'm creating history here, I replied. We were both laughing. It took me 5 minutes to fill it to the line. My jaw actually started hurting from not swallowing. Done, I said, screwing on the cap. I shook it up. The liquid turned a bright bubblegum pink. Seal it and ship it, Julian said. And 6 to 8 weeks, you'll know everything. Everything. That word haunts me now. I put the tube in the biohazard bag. I put the bag in the box. I sealed it all up. I'm actually kind of excited, I said. Don't you want to know where we come from? Julian shrugged. We're Whitfields. That's all that matters. I laughed, because even then, even before I knew anything was wrong, I knew that wasn't true. There was something about this family, something beneath the surface, something rotten. I just didn't know how rotten it actually was. I'm sending it tomorrow, I said, placing the box next to my plate. This is going to be so cool. Mom came back into the room. She was carrying a silver tray with a chocolate cake. 25 candles were flickering. Her face had changed. The tension was gone. Or maybe she was just hiding it better. Make a wish, she said, placing the cake in front of me. I closed my eyes. I didn't wish for anything related to DNA or family secrets. I just wished for a good year. I wish I was joking. I blew out the candles. Everyone clapped. Mom took a picture. I was smiling so big. I looked so happy, so naive, so completely devastatingly unaware. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. If you felt that weird tension in the room, would you have questioned it? Because I didn't. I just laughed it off, activated the kit, and spit in the tube. I had no idea I was spitting on my own father's grave. I dropped that box in the mail the very next morning. I stood in the corner of Clark and Fullerton. I watched the postal worker take it. I thought it was just a fun birthday gag. A cute little genetic party trick. It gets worse, actually. For 3 weeks, life went back to normal. Or what I thought was normal. I was working late at the Ogilvy office. We were pitching a campaign for a mattress brand. It was boring, corporate, totally mundane. I was grabbing drinks with coworkers. I was complaining about the subway delays. I completely forgot about the spit sitting in a lab somewhere. Then came Tuesday morning. I was standing on the CTA Brown line. It was rush hour. The train was packed tighter than a sardine can. I was crushed against the doors near the front car. I remember the ad above my head perfectly. It was for a personal injury lawyer. A guy with a broken arm. Hurt at work? Call now. I was staring at the lawyer's face, zoning out. The air in the car smelled like rain and cheap perfume. Then my pocket buzzed. It wasn't a text vibration. It was that specific long buzz for an alert. I fished my iPhone out of my North Face jacket. The lock screen lit up. 23andMe, your results are in. I felt a little flutter of excitement. Have you ever had that feeling? Just a little spark of curiosity? I unlocked the phone. I opened the app. The little orange circle spun. I was expecting to see if I was predisposed to caffeine addiction. Maybe I'd find out I had Irish ancestry. I wasn't expecting this. The dashboard loaded. It looked so clean, so clinical. I tapped on DNA relatives. You know how your top match is always your parents or siblings. Julian was right there at the top. His profile picture was that one from his graduation. Smug. Perfect. Julian, I tapped his name. I scrolled down to the relationship prediction. My breath caught in my throat. The words on the screen didn't say brother. They said half-brother. 24.8% DNA shared. I froze. I could see my reflection in the dark window. I looked pale, ghost-like. My grip on the metal pole tightened. The train screeched around the curve. The sound was deafening, but all I could hear was my own heart pounding. 24.8%. Full siblings share 50. We share half of that. I remember telling myself it was a glitch. System error, I thought. But 23andMe is precise. That's the whole point. I scrolled further down. I saw the physical traits section. I saw eye color. It listed likely blue. That's when it hit me, like a physical slap to the face. I flashed back to that birthday dinner. I had made a joke about Julian's blue eyes. Mom was holding her wine glass. I remembered her hand shaking. The wine was swirling in the glass. She flinched. She actually flinched when I talked about his eyes. I thought she was just tired. I thought she was stressed about the estate. No, she knew. She knew the eyes didn't match. She knew the bloodline was broken. The train lurched. Someone bumped into my shoulder. I felt nauseous. I looked around the car. Everyone was just living their lives. A guy was reading a newspaper. A girl was listening to music. They had no idea that my entire identity had just been erased. I felt the sweat on my back. Cold. Clammy. I just wanted to get off the train. I wanted to run. I looked back at the cracked screen. My hands started shaking so hard I dropped my phone. It landed face down on the dirty floor. People stared. I didn't care. If we aren't full siblings, then who is my father? If we aren't full siblings, then who is my father? I scrambled to pick up my phone. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it again. The screen was cracked. A spider web of broken glass over the word father. I looked around the train car. Everyone was staring at me. They probably thought I was having a breakdown. I kind of was. I needed to get out of there. The air was too thick. I could taste copper in my mouth. That metallic panic taste. The train screeched to a halt at Armitage. I didn't care that I was still 3 stops from work. I shoved through the doors before they even opened all the way. I ran up the stairs. My lungs were burning. Cold air hit my face. It was raining, just a drizzle, but it felt freezing. I hailed a cab. I know, it's expensive, but I couldn't be on the train. I couldn't be around people. I gave the driver the address for the townhouse. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Julian. Mom says you forgot your Tupperware. I stared at the screen. Tupperware! He was texting me about leftover lasagna while my entire existence was being rewritten. It gets worse, actually. I got to the house. It was that big limestone place on Dearborn. I let myself in with my key. I could hear the blender going from the kitchen, that low hum. It made me want to scream. I walked into the kitchen. Julian was standing there. He had his gym shorts on. He was making a protein shake. He looked so normal. So, golden child? I didn't say hello. I just walked right up to him. I shoved my phone in his face. Read it, I said. He flinched. He leaned back, blinking. What is this? Your little app glitching again? He laughed. It was this dry, dismissive sound. It says we're half-siblings, Julian. Half. That means one of us is a liar or a bastard, he rolled his eyes. He turned back to the blender. Blythe, stop being dramatic. It's an algorithm. It's a glitch. He poured his shake into a cup. We look exactly like Dad. You know that. He pointed at the fridge. There was a photo stuck there with a magnet. It was Julian and Dad from like 20 years ago. Fishing trip. Look at that nose, Julian said. That is a Whitfield nose if I've ever seen one. I looked at the photo. Julian had the nose. Dad had the nose. I didn't. I looked at my own reflection in the microwave door. My nose was smaller. Upturned. Mom's nose. Julian, look at the traits on my profile, I said. My voice cracked. It says blue eyes are likely. We don't have blue eyes. Nobody in our family has blue eyes. He wouldn't look at me. He just took a long sip of his shake. You're overthinking this, he said. You always do this. You create these scenarios in your head. Scenarios? You think I made this up. I felt the blood rush into my face. He slammed his cup down on the counter. Yes, I think you're jealous because I'm the one taking over the firm and you're stuck writing ad copy for cat food. That hurt because it was true, but that wasn't the point. I stepped closer to him. Why did Mom refuse to take the test, Julian? Why was she so scared of a Q-tip? He froze. His jaw got tight. That same clench Mom gets. She didn't want her data sold, he snapped. She's private. She's hiding something, I said, and you know it. He turned his back to me. He started washing his blender cup, scrubbing it aggressively, like he was trying to scrub away the words I was saying. I'm done with this conversation, he said. You're trying to tear this family apart over a glitch. I wish I was joking, I said. I really, really do. He just kept scrubbing. The water was running so loud, drowning out the silence. He wouldn't look at me. He just kept blending that smoothie, the noise drowning out the fact that our family was falling apart. Julian threw the sponge. It hit the stainless steel with a wet slap. He didn't even look at me. He just grabbed his keys and stormed out. The front door slammed. The whole townhouse seemed to flinch. I was left standing there, alone in the kitchen. The silence was loud, ringing in my ears. I looked down on my phone. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, but the text was still clear. Half-brother. 2 words. My entire reality fractured. I felt cold. My hands were actually shaking. I leaned against the marble counter for support. You know that feeling when the ground disappears beneath you? That was me. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, I must have stood there for an hour, just staring at the spinach stains in Julian's sink, trying to process how fast he turned on me. Then I heard it, the front door unlocking again. Eleanor was home. I checked the time. 4:30 p.m. She is never home this early. Tuesdays are for charity galas or salon appointments, not standing in our hallway. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I needed to look normal. But what is normal when your life is a lie? I walked into the foyer. She was placing her Louis Vuitton tote on the entry bench. Her movements were sharp, jerky. I could smell her perfume. Chanel No. 5. It usually smells expensive. Today it smelled like panic. Blythe? She didn't turn around. She was fixing her hair in the mirror. Why aren't you at work? I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. I took the day off. I took a step closer. Mom, we need to talk. It's about Julian and the DNA test. She froze. Her hands stopped midair. Then she turned slowly. Her eyes widened, not with confusion, with pure terror. She looked at my face. Then her eyes dropped to my pocket. She knew I had the phone. What about it? Her voice was steady, too steady. I told you those things are nonsense. Gimmicks designed to sell your data. I pulled the phone out. I turned the screen toward her. It says, Julian is my half-brother, Mom. Half. That means Dad isn't my father. She stared at the screen. The blue light hit her face. For a second, I saw cracks in her porcelain mask. Then the mask slammed back down. She laughed. A short, sharp sound. Oh, Blythe. You are always so melodramatic. You get that from your father's side. I am not being dramatic, I yelled. I have scientific proof right here. She stepped closer. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tight. Her nail stuck into my skin. You listen to me. You will not speak of this. Do you hear me? These tests are wrong. They are destroying families for clicks. She let go of my wrist. A red mark was already forming. I won't have you tearing this family apart over a glitch. Go to your room. Clean yourself up. I just stared at her. She wasn't acting like a mom who discovered a mistake. She was acting like a criminal who got caught. She turned on her heel. She marched down the long hallway. Her heels clicked against the hardwood. Click, click, click. She went straight to her bedroom. The door didn't just close. It slammed. Then came the sound that made my blood run cold, the lock turning. Click. Eleanor never locks her door. Never. I stood in the hallway. The house was quiet again. But I could hear movement behind the door. Pacing. Fast, frantic steps. Back and forth. And then I heard her voice. Muffled through the heavy wood. She knows. The panic was audible even through the door. The DNA test. It's back. She paused. No, she's here. She's in the house. Another pause. What do I do? She's asking about him. Him. Who is him? My dad is dead. Julian is ignoring me. Who else is there? I crept closer. I put my ear against the door. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. I backed away. I couldn't let her find me listening. I ran back to the kitchen. I sat on a bar stool. The room felt like a museum exhibit. Fake, perfectly curated, and full of rot. I looked at the family photo on the fridge, Julian and Dad. The matching noses, the Whitfield legacy, and me, the outsider, the liar. It gets worse, actually, because I realized something. She didn't act like it was a glitch. She acted like she'd been waiting for this bomb to go off for 25 years. And before you judge me for leaving, tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Because I still don't know if I made the right call. I just stood there in the hallway, staring at my mother's locked door. My wrist was throbbing. It actually hurt to move my fingers. I looked down at my arm. There were 4 distinct red marks. Her fingerprints were burning into my skin. I had to get out of there. I turned and walked to my bedroom. I locked the door behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed. My heart was pounding in my ears. I grabbed my laptop off the nightstand. I opened the 23andMe tab again. I couldn't just sit there and panic. I needed answers. I scrolled past the half-brother result. I couldn't deal with Julian right now. I clicked on the physical traits section. I scrolled down to eye color. The report popped up on the screen. It said likely blue. I just stared at the text. Here's the thing. My eyes are green. Sometimes they look gray in the winter, but they are definitely not blue. Then I thought about Dad, Richard. His eyes were dark brown, like deep chocolate brown. Julian has them too. Exact same shade. I thought about Mom. Her eyes are ice blue, very blue. But I remember high school biology. The gene for brown eyes is dominant. It usually overpowers blue. 2 brown-eyed parents usually have brown-eyed kids. Unless the dad listed on my birth certificate isn't my biological father. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have kept digging? Or would you have deleted the app and pretended? I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to my Google Photos. I typed Ben into the search bar. Only 4 photos came up. The most recent one was from 1998. I was a baby, maybe 6 months old. I clicked on the photo. It was Christmas morning. Our old living room, Dad was holding me, Julian was in the background, and there was Uncle Ben. Standing right next to the tree, he was wearing this bright red sweater, and his eyes. I zoomed in on the photo. The pixels got blurry, but I could see it. His eyes were bright blue, piercing blue, just like the report predicted. It gets worse, actually. I tried to remember the last time I saw him. I don't have a single memory. Not one. I remember Julian mentioning him once. He said Ben stopped coming around right after you were born, just packed up and moved to Florida. Who does that? Who abandons their entire family the moment their niece is born? Unless there is a very specific reason to run. I sat there in the silence of my room. The picture was getting clearer, and it was disgusting. Mom on the phone, the locked door, she said, she's asking about him. She wasn't talking about Richard. She was talking about Ben. I looked at the red marks on my wrist again. Then I looked back at the man in the red sweater. The nausea hit me all over again. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about Dad's own brother. Uncle Ben, Dad's brother. The one who disappeared to Florida when I was a baby. I wish I was joking, but I literally dry heaved. The room was spinning. The walls felt like they were closing in. Uncle Ben. My mom's brother-in-law. My dad's brother. I felt dirty. I felt like I needed to scrub my skin off. I threw on my North Face jacket. The hallway was freezing. My wrist was throbbing. Mom's grip had left a bruise shaped like a hand. I could see the purple finger marks in the hall mirror. Julian was still gone. The house was too quiet. I walked to the end of the hall. The attic stairs were there. You know that feeling when you're doing something you know you shouldn't? My heart was hammering. Thump, thump, thump against my ribs. I yanked the cord. Is theirs unfolded with a loud groan. I froze. Did Mom hear that? I held my breath, waiting for her door to open. Nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I climbed up. The air was thick. It smelled like old paper and mothballs. I clicked the bare bulb. Dust motes danced in the yellow light. There were boxes everywhere, stacks of them labeled with fading years. I scanned the labels. 1994 taxes, 1997 vacation. I needed 1998, the year I was born, the year Ben disappeared. And this is where it gets really messed up. I didn't have to dig deep. A shoebox was right on top. The label read, Baby's First Christmas, in Eleanor's perfect, neat cursive. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside hundreds of photos, rubber banded together in neat stacks. I sat cross-legged on the rough floorboards. A nail was digging into my ankle. I undid the rubber band. It snapped against my wrist. Sting! I thumbed through the glossy paper. They were cold to the touch. There was Mom, holding me, smiling for the camera. There was Dad, carving the turkey, looking like a proud father, and then him, Ben, in that red sweater. In every single photo, I pulled one out, a Polaroid with white borders. The timestamp on the bottom said, Deck 25, 1998, 4:15 p.m. It was Ben, sitting in the leather armchair in the living room. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at the baby in his arms. Me. And his face? He wasn't smiling. He looked terrified, like someone was about to take me away. But it wasn't just fear. It was possession, like I was an object he owned. His grip on my blanket was tight. His knuckles were white. Next to the shoebox was an old lamp. A Tiffany my mom hated. The lampshade was crooked, just like this family. I looked closer at the Polaroid. The Christmas tree lights were blurred in the background. I recognized the ornament, a glass star. It shattered the year I was 10. Mom cried for days when that star broke. Now I wonder if she was crying about the star, or if she was crying about Ben. If you've ever felt a chill run down your spine looking at a photo. That was me, sitting in a dusty attic, looking at 1998. I kept flipping. Another photo, by the Christmas tree. Ben standing behind Mom, his hand resting on her shoulder. Dad was in the foreground, blurry, unaware. They looked like a family. A sick, twisted family. I felt bile rising in my throat again. I put the photos down. I needed to find the last one. There was a loose picture at the bottom of the box, face down. It was heavier than the others. Thick cardstock. I picked it up. It was the same shot of Ben holding me, but this one felt different. I turned it over. Written in blue ballpoint pen. Dad's handwriting. It said, Ben saying goodbye to his favorite niece. But did he? He didn't leave for Florida until the summer. Why was he saying goodbye in December? Unless he wasn't saying goodbye to me, he was saying goodbye to his secret. I looked up at the attic ceiling. A shadow moved across the floorboards. I wasn't alone up here anymore. I didn't wait to see who was standing in the shadows. I just ran. I scrambled down the attic stairs so fast I almost tripped over the cord. The old wood was screaming under my sneakers. I could hear footsteps behind me. Or maybe that was just my heart beating in my ears. I didn't look back. I slammed my bedroom door. I locked it. Then I pushed my desk chair against the knob, just in case. I was sweating. It was cold in my room, but I was soaking wet. I sat on my bed. My chest was heaving. I looked at the Polaroids in my hand. Then, holding me, the look of terror on his face, I shoved them deep under my mattress, next to my old diary, where nobody looks. My phone was still in my hand. The 23andMe app was open. I stared at the half-brother result. Julian, the golden child, he shares a father with me. But whose DNA is actually running through my veins? You know when you're spiraling and you just keep pulling the thread? That was me. I hit the refresh button on the app. Once. Twice. The little circle spun on the black screen, spinning, like my life was just unraveling in real time. And this is where it gets really messed up. The screen flashed. New DNA relative found. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I tapped the notification. The name was Keisha Whitfield. Location? Miami, Florida. She had a cat in her profile picture, a calico sitting on a porch. Shared DNA, 12.5%. Relationship prediction, first cousin. I froze. Benjamin Whitfield had a daughter. He didn't just disappear to Florida to rot alone. He started a whole new family, a daughter named Keisha. I zoomed in on her face. She had his chin. She had his eyes. I felt like I was going to throw up. This whole time my mother is pretending Ben was just a mistake, a ghost, but he was alive. He was a dad to someone else. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done. Because I didn't think. I just reacted. My thumbs were shaking so bad I could barely hit the keys. I typed out a message. Hi, Keisha. This is going to sound crazy. Are you Benjamin Whitfield's daughter? I stared at the send button. If I sent this, there was no going back. I was blowing up my own life. I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. Delivered. I sat there staring up a screen. The room was completely silent, except for the hum of my laptop fan on my desk. Then the status changed. Under her name, it went from online to typing. My breath hitched. She was awake. She was writing back. The 3 dots bounced on the screen. Bounce, bounce, bounce. It felt like an hour. It was probably 10 seconds. Then the text appeared. Yes, who is this? I stared at the letters. They were blurry through my tears. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain that your uncle is your dad? How do you explain that the man who gave you away is the same man she called daddy? I looked at the percentage again. 12.5%. First cousin. The math is clean. If Ben is my uncle, she is my cousin. But looking at her face, I just knew the timeline works. The location works. But the feeling in my gut, if she's my cousin through Ben and Ben is my uncle, why does the math make it feel like he could be my father? Yes? Who is this? The text glowed on my cracked screen. I was sitting on my bedroom floor. My back was pressed against the heavy oak dresser. The door was locked. I kept staring at the brass knob, waiting for it to turn. It didn't, but I could hear the floorboards creaking above me, directly overhead. In the attic, someone was up there. You know that feeling when you're about to jump off a cliff? That was my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I typed, "My name is Blythe. I think we're related." I stared at the words. Too casual. I deleted it. I typed, "I'm Benjamin Whitfield's niece. I live in Chicago." I hit send before I could panic and delete it again. It was 8:43 p.m. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge downstairs and that creaking in the attic. Scrape. Thud. Drag. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please don't let the door open. Then my phone buzzed. My eyes snapped open. Keisha replied instantly. I knew this day would come. 3 little dots bounced on the screen. She was typing more. Then a photo loaded. It wasn't an old scanned picture. This was new, taken recently. A man sat in a wheelchair on a screened-in porch. There were plastic palm trees in the background. He was wearing a faded Florida Gators t-shirt. He looked thin, frail, like a strong wind could blow him over. A clear plastic tube ran under his nose, but his face, oh God, I grabbed the handheld mirror from my nightstand. I held it up next to the phone screen. The eyes were the exact same shade of icy blue. That sharp, angular jawline. Even the way his mouth curved slightly to the left when he frowned. I wish I was joking. It was like looking at a photo of myself in 40 years. It was undeniable. I looked at his hands in the photo. They were spotted with age. The knuckles were swollen. I looked down at my own hands. I had the same bumps on my knuckles. I never noticed it before. I felt dizzy, like the room was spinning. I set the mirror down on the rug. Another text popped up. My dad said you might reach out. You look just like him. My dad said. He knew about me. He knew I existed. And he talked about me to his daughter. Why did Mom say he ran away? Why did she say he abandoned the family? Something wasn't adding up. The floorboards creaked again in the attic, loud this time, right near the pull-down stairs. I pulled my knees to my chest. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. If you've ever felt trapped in your own house, you know what I mean. I waited for the next message. It came through 5 seconds later, and it wasn't a friendly greeting. It wasn't, "Hi, cousin." Keisha typed, "How much did they tell you? What didn't they tell me?" My blood turned to ice, and this is where it gets really messed up. The creaking above me stopped. It was so sudden. My ears were ringing in the silence. I looked down at my phone again. Keisha's text was glowing on my cracked screen. "How much did they tell you?" I couldn't type. My thumbs were shaking too hard. I hit the green call button instead. It rang once, twice, then a sharp click. "Hello?" A woman's voice, but not an old woman, a girl. She sounded my age. "Keisha?" I whispered. I was holding my breath so tight my chest hurt. "It's Blythe." The attic floorboards groaned again. A deep wooden sound, like someone was shifting their weight right over my ceiling fan. I ignored it. I focused on the voice in my ear. "I know who you are," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I've seen pictures. My dad has a picture of you on his nightstand." My dad. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Is he?" I started, but my voice cracked. "Is he there?" "He's in hospice," she said. "He's sleeping right now. The cancer, it's everywhere now." I could hear a machine beeping in the background, a rhythmic, high-pitched beep. 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 It was the sound of my biological father dying. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. The mattress springs squeaked. I looked at my bedroom door. It was locked, but it felt thin. "He knew you'd reach out," Keisha said. "He told me to wait for it." There was a rustling sound on her end. "Like papers. He wrote you a letter, Blythe?" I froze. "A letter?" I asked. "When?" 1999, she said. "He mailed it right after he left Chicago. He sent it to the Whitfield house." My blood ran cold. Literally cold. I shivered even though it was August. My mother is meticulous. She never throws anything away. She keeps tax returns from the 90s. She keeps birthday cards from people she hates. If a letter came to this house 25 years ago, she has it. "I don't have it," Keisha said. "He told me he sent it there. He said your mom would know what to do with it. You guys probably think I should just go ask her for it. Right? Just walk downstairs and say, 'Hey, Mom, hand over the letter from my real dad.' But you don't know my mother. You don't know the lengths she goes to for politeness." "It was in a blue envelope," Keisha whispered. "He made me memorize that. Tell her the blue envelope," he said. My mind raced. Blue. Had I seen a blue envelope? The attic stairs creaked again. Louder this time. Whoever was up there was moving toward the hatch. But the anger was rising in my throat, hotter than the fear. "I have to go," I said quickly. "There's someone in my house." Keisha gasped. "Don't trust them," she said. "They knew. They always knew." The line went dead. I sat in the dark, listening to the silence in the attic. My life is in that letter. The truth is in that envelope. And she has kept it from me for 25 years. Mom has a letter from my real father written before I could even talk, and she never mentioned it. I waited until I heard the front door slam shut. The lock clicked. The house was finally empty. I looked at my phone. 11:30 a.m. Mom was at her charity luncheon. Julian was at the office. The coast was clear. I climbed down the attic ladder. Every step creaked in the silence. I hit the hallway floor. I didn't look up at the hatch. I didn't want to see the darkness. I walked straight to Dad's study. The door was usually locked. Today it wasn't. I turned the brass knob, cold metal against my palm. I stepped inside. The air smelled like old paper and Dad's cherry pipe tobacco. It was heavy, suffocating. I went to the wall. Behind the desk hung that ugly sailboat painting, the one Mom hated. I lifted it off the hook. I leaned it against the leather chair. There it was, the black steel safe. A sentry safe, set into the drywall. I stared at the dial. My hands were shaking. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans. Do you know that feeling? When you're about to cross a line you can't uncross? I took a deep breath. Left to 20. Right to 10. Left to 45. The combination was Dad's birthday, May 12th. I spun the wheel. Click, click. The sound was so loud in the quiet house. I kept glancing at the door. I expected Julian to walk in. I expected Mom to start screaming. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I grabbed the handle. It was stiff. I pulled it hard. The door swung open. I shined my phone flashlight inside. First, I saw cash. Bundles of $100 bills. Rubber bands dry and cracking. Then, I saw papers. Deeds to the townhouse. Stocks. Insurance policies. It looked like a getaway kit. Like Dad was planning to run. But I wasn't here for the money. I was looking for a letter. I pushed the stack of bonds aside. My fingers brushed against something fragile. I pulled it out. It wasn't a white envelope. It was thick parchment, yellowed at the edges. The color of old bones. I flipped it over. No return address. Just a postmark in the corner. Chicago, July 1999. I looked at the handwriting. Blue ink. Loopy, messy cursive. It said just 2 words. The baby. I recognized that B, the way the line swooped down below the rest. I had seen it just an hour ago on Keisha's phone. It was Ben's handwriting. My uncle, my biological father, he sent this to Dad. Why? Maybe Dad was protecting me. Or maybe he was hiding the evidence too. It gets worse, actually. If Ben mailed this here in '99, Dad knew. Dad didn't just suspect the truth. He had the proof in his hand. He kept it for 25 years. While I sat at dinner with them, while I called him Dad, I felt sick. My stomach churned. I looked at the flap. It was sealed. With red wax. The Whitfield crest stamped into it. Who does that? Hides a letter from the man who supposedly stole his wife. Unless it wasn't a betrayal. Unless it was a conspiracy. I sat on the floor of Dad's study. Dust motes danced in the light from the window. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantle. Tick. Tock. If I open this, I can't go back. If I read what's inside, the Whitfield family is over. But I have to know. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened it right there? Or would you have run? I put my finger under the flap. The paper felt like it could crumble. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the truth. I sat in Dad's leather chair. The room smelled like old paper and lemon polish. It was freezing in here. The AC was always set too low. I looked at the red wax seal one last time. The Whitfield crest. A lion with a shield. The same ring Dad wore every day. My hands were shaking so hard, the letter rattled against the desk. I took a deep breath. I slid my finger under the flap, and I ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of thick parchment. It felt heavy, like it carried the weight of the last 25 years. The edges were yellowing. The handwriting was blue ink, loopy cursive. It looked rushed, like he was terrified. I started to read, "I loved your mother from the moment I saw her." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was so dramatic, but it was real. She has my eyes, Richard. You know she does. I paused. I looked up at the ceiling. I couldn't believe it. He admitted it. Right there. Ben was my father. You know that feeling when you find a missing puzzle piece? But the picture it reveals is actually a nightmare. That was me holding that letter. I wish I was joking. I looked back down at the page. The ink got darker near the bottom, like he was pressing harder. You know about the money, Richard. You found the ledger. My stomach turned over. I felt sick. Money? What ledger? I leaned in closer to the desk lamp. The light bulb flickered. You went to the partners. You told them you'd expose me. My blood ran cold. My dad exposing his own brother? Dad was the saint. He was the guy who helped old ladies cross the street. This didn't make sense. I am leaving tonight. I am going to Florida. I read the words out loud. My voice echoed in the empty study. You gave me a choice, Richard. Prison or Florida. I closed my eyes for a second. I couldn't process it. My dad threatened his own brother with prison? And then I saw the final sentence, the one that made my heart stop. I chose to leave you alive. The letter slipped from my fingers. It fell onto the Persian rug. I just stared at it. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the corner. Tick, tock. It was driving me crazy. I looked at the open safe. The stacks of cash. The rubber bands were dry and cracked. The deeds to the townhouse. The extra life insurance policies. It wasn't a getaway kit. Dad wasn't planning to run away. He was paying Ben off. He bought his silence. He paid for his own brother to disappear. And honestly, I want to know what you would have done, because I felt like I was going to throw up. I looked around the room, the mahogany desk, the shelves of law books, the trophies that said Father of the Year. It was all a facade, a pretty lie. Dad knew. He knew I wasn't his. He knew Julian was the only heir, and instead of telling the truth, he blackmailed his brother. He sent him away. He made him leave me. I picked up the letter again. I smoothed out the crease with my palm. The date at the top was July 14, 1999, 2 weeks after my first birthday. He waited a year. Dad waited all year to do this. I touched my face. My cheeks were wet. I hadn't even realized I was crying. I thought of the funeral. Low, goin, and weed and uke. I grieved for a man who didn't exist. The man sitting in this chair wasn't a victim. He was a monster. He stole my childhood. He stole my real father. And he made us pay for it. My father, the man who raised me, who I thought was too good for this world, blackmailed my real dad into abandoning me. I heard the front door slam. The sound echoed through the entire house like a gunshot. I froze in Dad's leather chair. The letter was still in my hand. The safe was wide open behind me. Stacks of $100 bills were staring right at anyone who walked in. I knew that knock. It was Mom's keys hitting the marble table. She wasn't supposed to be back until dinner. I looked at my phone. It was only 2:15 p.m. I shoved the letter into my pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get the safe door closed. The cash was still visible. The deeds were still spread out. I heard her heels clicking toward the study. Click, click. Getting louder. The handle turned. The door flew open. She was standing there with her Louis Vuitton tote. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair was perfect. Then she saw the safe. Her face went white as a sheet. She dropped her bag on the floor. Blythe, what are you doing in here? Her voice wasn't warm anymore. It was cold. Deadly cold. I stood up. I tried to hide behind the chair. Mom, I can explain. I was backing away toward the window. She walked toward the safe. She saw the empty space where the letter had been. She turned on me so fast I almost fell. Where is it? She was screaming now. Where's the letter? I tried to move toward the door. Mom, please listen. She lunged at me. She grabbed my jacket with both hands. Her fingers were digging into my shoulders. Give it to me. I couldn't believe this was happening. My own mother was attacking me. She ripped the letter from my pocket. She tore it in half. Then she tore it again. And again. She was breathing so hard I thought she might pass out. You have no idea what you've done. She threw the pieces on the floor. He gave you a life. Her eyes were wild. We gave you a life. Do you know what would have happened to us if this got out? I was backed against the wall. Mom, he's my father. She slapped me across the face. Hard. My cheek was burning. I could taste blood. Richard is your father. She was inches from my face. The man who paid for everything. The man who put a roof over your head. The man who sent you to college. She gestured around the room. All of this. This house. Your car. Your life. It would have been gone. She started pacing. Do you think people would have kept hiring him? Do you think the firm would have kept a partner whose brother was an embezzler? I couldn't speak. I just watched her. Your father made a choice. She smoothed her hair. He chose to keep this family together. He chose to give you a normal life. She looked at me with pure disgust. And this is how you repay him? By digging up graves? I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. This conversation never happened. She kicked the pieces of the letter under the desk. You will never speak of this again. To anyone, not even Julian. She picked up her bag. Fix the mess you made in here. She walked out and slammed the door. I stood there for 10 minutes, just staring at the closed door. I knelt down and started picking up the pieces of the letter. My hands were still trembling. I could hear her in the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, pouring a glass of wine, like nothing had happened. I looked at the torn paper in my hands. She wasn't protecting me. She was protecting her brand new kitchen and her country club membership. I was on my hands and knees on the Persian rug. My cheek was throbbing in time with my heartbeat. I could hear the distinct clink of crystal against glass. Mom was in the kitchen pouring herself more wine. Then the heavy front door slammed shut. Julian's keys hit the marble table in the foyer. He was humming. He sounded happy. The smell of cold Chicago air followed him into the house. I looked at the scattered cash around me. I looked at the torn pieces of parchment on the floor. I had seconds before he walked in. I started shoving the money back into the black steel safe. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped a stack of hundreds. It fell over, spreading across the rug. Mom appeared in the study doorway. She didn't look like a woman who just slapped her daughter across the face. She looked like a tragic victim. Julian, thank God you're home, she said. Her voice was trembling perfectly. It's Blythe. She's having another episode. Julian dropped his Nike gym bag on the floor. He walked into the study. He saw the open safe. He saw the insurance policies scattered everywhere. What is going on? He asked. He looked at me. I was still kneeling on the floor in Dad's study. I must have looked insane. Surrounded by financial documents, torn paper everywhere, tears streaming down my face. Did you do this? He asked. Did you rob Dad's safe? Mom stepped closer to him. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her Chardonnay. She's saying terrible things about your father, Julian, accusing him of fraud, of blackmailing people. She let out a dramatic sigh. She found an old letter. She got upset and she tore it up herself to make it look like a conspiracy. That was the moment my heart actually stopped. She was rewriting the script in real time. That's a lie, I whispered. My voice sounded cracked and broken. You slapped me, Mom. You tore the letter. You know you did. Julian looked at me. Then he looked at the red handprint swelling on my cheek. His eyes didn't widen in shock. They narrowed in judgment. Is this true? He asked. But he wasn't asking, Mom. He was demanding an answer from me, like I was a criminal. I'm not crazy, I said. I tried to stand up. My legs felt like jelly. I found evidence. Dad paid Uncle Ben to leave. It's all in there. I pointed to the pile of stock certificates on the desk, but Julian just shook his head. She's not well, Julian, Mom said softly. She placed a hand on his arm. You know how she gets. Dramatic. Always needing attention. It's the stress of the job. I looked at my brother. We used to build blanket forts in the living room. We used to share secret passwords. But he wasn't looking at his sister. He was looking at a liability to his inheritance. Put the money back, Blythe, he snapped. He stepped over the pieces of the letter like they were trash. Dad built this legacy, and you're trying to burn it down because you're jealous of me? Jealous. That word hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Have you ever had a moment where you realize the person standing in front of you is a total stranger? Because that was this exact moment. He wasn't even listening. He was reciting the lines Mom fed him without question. I'm not jealous of you, I said. I'm trying to find the truth. He laughed. It was a cold, hard sound I'd never heard before. There's no truth, Blythe. Just family. And you're tearing us apart. I looked at the DNA app glowing on my phone screen. Then I looked at Julian. We shared 50% of our DNA. But looking at him now, I felt nothing but coldness. He was exactly like them. He chose the money. He chose the reputation. Because they were his blood. And biologically, I wasn't. He told me to go to my room, like a disobedient child. I picked up the torn pieces of Ben's letter. I held them tight against my chest. And I realized I was completely alone in this house. My own brother looked at me like I was a stranger. Because biologically to his line, I was. I shoved the last stack of hundreds into the safe and slammed the heavy steel door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the dial to turn. Click. I was standing in the middle of my dad's study, surrounded by secrets that could destroy this whole family. And suddenly, I just knew I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not ever. I looked at the mess on the desk, the torn paper, the open ledger. I grabbed the pieces of Ben's letter. I stuffed them deep into the front pocket of my jeans, against my hip. They felt like a brick in my pocket. I needed to get out. I walked to the door. The hallway was silent, but I could hear the faint clinking of glasses in the kitchen. Mom and Julian, celebrating. While I stood here, bruised and fatherless, it was sickening. I ran up the main staircase. Usually, I creak on the third step, but I was moving too fast to make a sound. I burst into my bedroom and locked the door behind me. I leaned back against the wood, trying to catch my breath. My heart was beating so fast, I thought my ribs might crack. Have you ever had that moment where your body takes over before your brain does? Like your lizard brain is screaming run while you're still trying to process what just happened? I walked to my closet and slid the door open. The smell of my old perfume and laundry detergent hit me. It smelled like a life that didn't exist anymore. I reached up and yanked my North Face duffel bag from the top shelf. I threw it onto the bed. I didn't fold anything. I just grabbed armfuls of clothes from the dresser and shoved them in. Jeans, hoodies, socks. I grabbed my passport from the nightstand. I grabbed my laptop charger. I looked at the photo on my desk. Me and Julian, aged 10 and 12, holding up a fish we caught on Lake Michigan. He was smiling then. I knocked the photo frame face down onto the rug. I couldn't look at him. I zipped the bag shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house. I walked back into the hallway. I threw the bag over my shoulder. It felt heavier than it should. I started down the stairs, and that's when I saw him. Julian. He was standing at the bottom of the staircase. He was blocking the front door. He had his arms crossed over his chest. The light from the transom window cast a long shadow across his face. He looked like a stranger. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. His voice was low, flat. "I'm leaving," I said. "Mom said you need to go to your room," he said. He took a step up. The wood creaked under his weight. "Julian, move," I said. I tried to step down, to squeeze past him on the railing. "You aren't leaving until you apologize to Mom," he said. He planted his feet right in the middle of the stairs. He looked genuinely angry. "Apologize?" I almost laughed. "She slapped me, Julian. Look at my face." He squinted at me in the dark. Then he shook his head. "She's under a lot of stress. You're the one causing problems." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my brother. We shared DNA. Well, some of us did anyway. I tried to push past him. I just needed to get to the door. He grabbed my arm. It wasn't a brotherly grab. He dug his fingers right into the bruise Mom had left 10 minutes ago. The pain was sharp. White hot, I gasped. "Let go of me," I yelled. "Stop being so dramatic," he hissed. "You're always so dramatic." He squeezed harder. "You need to fix this. You need to fix what you broke." I looked at his eyes. There was no love in them, just possession. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting the Whitfield name. I used my free hand. I shoved him as hard as I could in the center of his chest. He stumbled backward. His Nike sneaker caught on the edge of the Oriental runner rug. I didn't wait to see if he fell. I scrambled down the rest of the stairs. I grabbed the brass handle of the front door. It was freezing cold. I turned the lock. I yanked it open. I ran out onto the porch. The cold Chicago air hitting my wet face. I pushed past him, but I heard him whisper behind me, "You're ruining everything." I didn't stop running until I hit the blue line at Fullerton. I just got on a train. I didn't care where it went. I ended up in Wicker Park. I booked the cheapest Airbnb I could find on my phone while walking. It was a basement apartment. Concrete floors, a mattress on a box spring. I locked the deadbolt. The air in the room smelled like damp carpet and old cat pee. I sank onto the mattress. It was lumpy and wrapped in plastic. My heart was still hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled my knees to my chest. The bruise on my arm was turning a deep purple. Julian's fingerprints were actually visible on my skin. Who does that to their little sister? I know he's stressed, but he hurt me. I looked around the room. There was a mini fridge humming in the corner. A stained lampshade on the floor. This wasn't my life. This wasn't the Whitfield legacy. I reached for the wine bottle I bought at the corner store. I twisted the cap off and drank. The cheap alcohol burned my throat. I needed to understand. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I opened my laptop. The The light from the screen hurt my eyes in the dark room. I navigated to my iCloud drive. The folder was named Blythe, Baby25. I clicked on the first file. It was a video. My birthday party. Dad is holding the camera. He's singing happy birthday. His voice sounds so happy, but I turned the volume up. I listened to the background noise. Mom isn't singing. She's asking someone, did Richard see Ben yet? My blood ran cold. They were talking about it right in front of me. I scrolled further down. A photo from the lake house. I'm about 3 years old. I'm sitting on Dad's lap on the dock. He's wearing his Chicago Cubs hat. I always loved this photo. I thought he looked proud, but now I zoomed in. I mean, really zoomed in. I stared at his eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking over my shoulder at Mom. And the expression, it wasn't love. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. And his hands. Look at his hands on my waist. They are curled into fists. He is gripping me so tightly, like he wants to throw me in the water, but he can't. I moved to the next photo. Thanksgiving. I'm eating mashed potatoes. Mom is cutting the turkey. She's laughing, but her eyes are darting around the room. She's checking the doors, checking the windows. She wasn't afraid of burglars. She was afraid of the truth getting out. I took another long drink of the wine. The bottle was half empty now. I felt sick. Not just from the wine, but from the realization. You know that feeling when the floor drops out from under you? That was happening to me. I wasn't a daughter to him. I was living, breathing evidence of his wife's betrayal, a hostage. I was sitting on the floor of this Airbnb in Wicker Park. My back was against the cheap particle board bed frame. The cheap wine was swirling in my stomach. I felt sick. My phone lit up the dark room. The screen flashed a number I didn't recognize. Harrison and Associates, FL. I almost didn't answer. Who calls from a law firm at 11 p.m.? My hand hovered over the screen. I took a breath. I swiped green. A woman's voice came through. Crisp, professional, completely detached. Is this Blythe Whitfield? I said yes. My throat felt tight. I'm calling regarding the estate of Benjamin Whitfield. My stomach dropped. I gripped the phone harder. He passed away 20 minutes ago. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the peeling paint on the wall. She kept talking, like she was reading a grocery list. Mr. Whitfield amended his will 2 weeks ago. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot against my cold skin. He has bequeathed his property in Key West to you. The words didn't make sense. Key West? A house? The deed is already processed, she said. You are the sole owner. I looked at the digital photos on my laptop. The Thanksgiving photo, the fake smiles. I looked at the bruise on my arm, purple fingerprints in the shape of a hand. This whole city felt like a cage. My mother was the warden. Julian was the guard. But Ben, my biological dad, he just left me a key. I'm emailing you the documents now, the lawyer said. Then she hung up. Just like that, no condolences, no sympathy, just the facts. My phone dinged. An attachment appeared. Deed of transfer. I stared at the PDF. It was real. I opened the attachment. There was the address, a street in Key West. A piece of paper that says I own land. Land that is nowhere near Chicago. Nowhere near them. I wish I was joking. It gets worse, actually. Ben was dying when he wrote that will. He knew he was running out of time. He was thinking of me, not Julian, not Mom, me, the secret daughter he never got to know. And you know what the crazy part is? They can't touch this. It's not in the Whitfield Trust. It's not in Dad's estate. It's mine, solely mine. I closed my laptop. The room felt different. The air felt lighter. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but I was standing. I looked around the dingy Airbnb. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I have a way out now. And honestly, I want to know what you would do. Would you take the house and run? Or would you stay and fight? My biological father just died, and his parting gift was a way out of this mess. I stood up from the floor of the Airbnb. My legs were shaky, but my mind was made up. I was done running. I grabbed my duffel bag from the bed. It was gray canvas, battered from years of use. I threw in my laptop. I threw in my charger. I didn't even fold my clothes. I just zipped the bag shut. I opened the Southwest app on my phone. The blue logo glowed in the dark room. Chicago Midway to Miami International. 6 a.m. departure. I selected seat 14A. I pressed purchase without checking the price. The confirmation screen flashed. It was real. I was actually leaving. Has anyone else ever just booked a one-way ticket in the middle of the night? Because I need to know if I'm crazy. I walked outside into the biting Chicago wind. It cut right through my North Face jacket. A black Honda Civic pulled up to the curb. License plate 849KGD. I got in the back seat. The smell of pine air freshener filled the small space. I watched the city skyline fade in the rearview mirror. It looked like a cage I was finally escaping. Midway Airport was eerily quiet at 4 a.m. The floor was polished so bright I could see my reflection. The air smelled like burned coffee and industrial cleaner. I dragged my bag across the terminal. The wheels rattled loudly against the tile. I sat near gate B12. The blue plastic chairs were cold. I bought a bottle of water. The plastic felt slick against my sweaty palm. Group B boarding now. The announcer's voice echoed off the walls. I stood in line, shuffling forward. Scanning my phone, the agent nodded. She didn't look at my face. Just the screen. Beep! I walked on the jet bridge. The air was stale and recycled. I stepped onto the plane. The smell of jet fuel hit me instantly. I found 14A. It was a window seat. I collapsed into the narrow cushion. I buckled the seatbelt tight across my waist. My hands gripped the armrests until my knuckles turned white. The engine roared. We taxied to the runway, then liftoff. The ground fell away. Chicago became a grid of tiny lights, then just clouds, endless white clouds. Once we leveled off, I opened the email from the lawyer, the PDF attachment. Date of transfer. I zoomed in on the purchase date, February 14th, 2001. I looked at the price, paid in full, cash. My brain did the math. Ben left Chicago in July 1999. Dad paid him off that summer. 18 months later, Ben buys a house in cash. That wasn't just Ben's savings. That was the payoff money. Richard paid Ben to stay away from me. Richard paid Ben to never contact me again. But Ben didn't spend it. He saved it. He bought a house for the daughter he wasn't allowed to know. If you found out your inheritance was built on blackmail, would you take it? Be honest. I stared at the clouds outside the window. The irony was suffocating. My existence funded that house. My father's exile funded that house. Richard tried to buy silence. He bought me a future instead. Richard paid to keep Ben away. Ben saved that money for me. Who really won? I stepped off the plane into the jet bridge. The air hit me instantly. It wasn't just warm. It was heavy. It felt like walking into a warm bath. I was sweating in my North Face jacket. I unzipped it as I walked toward baggage claim. My hands were shaking. I gripped the handle of my gray duffel bag until my knuckles turned white. I was terrified. I was about to meet her, Keisha, my half-sister, the only other person in the world who knew what it felt like to be a Whitfield lie. I texted her from the curb. I'm here, outside Terminal D. She replied in seconds. The Silver Palm Diner on Biscayne. I'm in booth 4. I flagged down a taxi. The driver smelled like vanilla air freshener and old cigarettes. I stared out the window the whole drive. Miami looked different than Chicago. No gray buildings, no snow piles. Just palm trees and bright pink stucco. It felt fake. Like a movie set backdrop. But then we pulled up to the diner. It was a dive. Neon lights buzzing in the afternoon sun. Red vinyl booths visible through the greasy window. This felt real. I paid the driver. I took a deep breath. I walked inside. A bell dinged above the door. The smell of bacon and strong coffee washed over me. I scanned the room. My heart stopped. There she was. Booth 4. She was wearing a bright yellow sundress. Her hair was in messy curls. She looked up, her eyes locked onto mine. I swear, time just stopped. It was like looking in a mirror. We had the same chin, the same wide-set eyes, the same nervous way of biting our lip. She stood up. I walked over. I felt like I was sleepwalking. You must be Blythe, she said. Her voice sounded like mine, but deeper, raspier. I'm Keisha. We didn't hug right away. We just stood there looking at each other. You know that feeling when you see a dog that looks just like your dog? It was like that, but for my soul. Then she opened her arms. I stepped in. She smelled like coconut sunscreen and fabric softener. I started crying. I couldn't help it. I just sobbed into her yellow dress. She held me tight. She didn't ask why. She just rubbed my back. We sat down in the booth. The waitress slapped down 2 plastic menus. Coffee? Yes, please, Keisha said. Make it 2, I whispered. I looked at her face across the table. I couldn't stop staring. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong in your own family, you know exactly what I'm feeling right now. I was home, and I had just met her 5 minutes ago. So, she said, you look like him. Dad? She nodded. Ben, yeah, you have his nose. I have his eyes, I said. That too, she smiled. But you have his stubbornness too. I can see it. She took a sip of her coffee. He loved you, you know. I know, I said. No, Blythe, you don't. She reached into her purse. It was a woven straw bag. She pulled out a photo. It was old. The edges were curled. It was Ben, holding a baby. But it wasn't me. It was Keisha. He talked about you every single day, she said. The girl in Chicago. That's what he called you. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. He said he had to leave, she said. To keep you safe. Safe from what? From Richard. I almost dropped my coffee cup. You know about Richard? She leaned in closer. I know everything. Ben kept a ledger too. It gets worse, actually. Richard didn't just pay him to leave, she said. Richard paid him to stay away. She tapped her fingernail on the table. He bought Ben's silence with your childhood. I felt sick. The eggs and bacon smell suddenly turned my stomach. That man paid to keep me away from my own father? And Ben took it, she said, because he was weak. She looked sad. But he saved every penny. For you. I looked at her, this stranger who knew my whole life story. I have a house in Key West, I said. He left it to me. She laughed. It was a loud, happy sound. Of course he did. That was the getaway fund. She grabbed my hand across the table. Ben wasn't a villain, Blythe. He was just broken. But you're not broken. She squeezed my hand. You're here, and you're free. I pulled out my phone. I need to document this, I said. Why? She asked. Because my mother is gonna try to say you don't exist. That sounds like a Whitfield, she smirked. I held the phone up. We squeezed our faces together. Say traitors, I joked. Traitors, she yelled. I snapped the photo. I looked at the screen. 2 girls, same jawline, same mischievous grin. We didn't look like the Whitfields. We looked like us. I showed her the picture. We look like trouble, she said. I wish I was joking, I replied. But trouble is exactly what we are. And honestly, I want to know what you guys would do. Would you burn the Whitfield house down or just take the money? Because I am seriously considering both options right now. But for the first time in 25 years, I looked at someone and saw myself. I wasn't a Whitfield lie anymore. I was Blythe, and I wasn't alone. We walked out of the Silver Palm Diner. The humidity outside was instant. It wrapped around me like a heavy, wet blanket. It wasn't the climate-controlled chill of the townhouse. This air felt alive. We got into the rental car. It was a silver Ford Fiesta. The seats were hot. I sat down and winced. Keisha started the engine. The air conditioning blasted. Cold air hit my face. I closed my eyes for a second. We pulled onto the highway. Keisha didn't speak. She just kept her eyes on the road. I watched the Miami skyline fade in the rearview mirror. The glass skyscrapers looked like jagged teeth. I was glad to see them go. We hit the overseas highway. You know this road if you've been here. It is just concrete and water. Endless water. The Atlantic on one side, the Gulf on the other. The water was a color I didn't have a name for. Not blue, not green. It was turquoise glass. I rolled down the window. The wind was loud. It whipped my hair across my face. I didn't try to fix it. I just let it tangle. Have you ever felt the world get smaller? That's how I felt on that bridge. The drama in Chicago felt millions of miles away. Julian's text messages, Mom's voice, the locked safe. It was all just noise. Here, there was just the engine and the ocean. I looked at my phone. No service, just a gray no signal bar. I turned the phone off. Good. Let them wonder. Let them panic. I was free. We drove for hours. We crossed the 7-mile bridge. It seemed to go on forever. The water was so calm. It looked like a painting. I thought about Ben. He must have driven the same road. Did he feel scared? Or did he feel relief? He drove away from his fortune. He drove away from his name. But he drove toward me. He was buying a future for a daughter he couldn't raise. My chest felt tight. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like salt and gasoline. I want to ask you guys something. Have you ever just wanted to disappear? To drive until the road runs out? That was Ben. And honestly, that's me right now. Finally, we saw the sign, Key West, 4 miles. The traffic slowed down. Scooters were everywhere. People were walking with drinks in hand. It felt like a different planet. Keisha turned off the main road. We went onto a side street. The pavement turned to asphalt. Then it turned to gravel. The houses here were colorful. Pinks, corals, yellows. They were small. Bungalows, not mansions. They had rocking chairs on porches. They had bicycles in the driveways. She stopped the car. "We're here," she said. Her voice was soft. I looked out the window. There it was. Number 402. It was painted a pale, dusty blue. The paint was peeling a little near the gutters. There was a small front porch with white railings. 2 palm trees framed the front door. They were huge. The fronds swayed in the breeze. A pink bicycle lay on its side in the yard. A red helium balloon was tied to the mailbox. It was bobbing in the wind. I grabbed the door handle. My hand was sweating. I stepped out. The gravel crunched under my sneakers. It was hot, maybe 90 degrees. I walked toward the porch. The wood was weathered, gray. Silver, it looked old. It looked honest. Not marble that pretends to be stone, just wood that has seen the sun. I stood on the top step. I turned around. I could see the water. It was right there, 50 feet away. No walls. No gates. Just open water. Keisha walked up behind me. She opened her purse. The leather creaked. She pulled out a set of keys. Not a key card. Not a fob. Actual metal keys on a ring. She unhooked one. It was an old brass key. It looked like it belonged in a storybook. She held it out to me. "I want you to take this," she said. I looked at the key. Then I looked at her. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said. "It's yours. Ben wanted you to have it. No strings. No trust fund conditions. No lawyers. It's just a key." I reached out. My fingers brushed her palm. I took the key. It was warm. It felt solid in my hand. I walked to the front door. There was a screen door too. The screen was torn a little at the bottom, like a cat had scratched it. I put the key in the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned my wrist. Click. The lock opened. I pushed the door open. It squeaked. A long, high-pitched squeak. The sound echoed inside. I stepped across the threshold. The air inside was still. It smelled like vanilla and maybe old paper. It was dim. The curtains were drawn. Dust motes were floating in the shafts of light. The floor was checkered linoleum. 1950 style. It was faded. I looked around the small living room. There was a couch covered in a sheet. A table with 3 legs. A lamp without a shade. It was empty. It was dusty. It was perfect. My knees buckled. I just sank to the floor. I sat right there on the linoleum. The tears came instantly. I wasn't sobbing. It was just leaking. Tears streaming down my face. Hot and fast. I wasn't crying because Ben was gone. I wasn't crying because Richard was a monster. I was crying because I was home. I was crying because for the first time in 25 years, I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to be a Whitfield. I didn't have to worry about my nose or my eyes or my DNA. I was just Blythe, sitting on a floor in a blue house in Key West. Keisha sat down next to me. She didn't say a word. She just put her arm around my shoulder. We sat there for a long time. The only sound was the wind in the palm trees outside. And the ocean. The sound of the waves hitting the shore, a constant rhythm. It was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. I wiped my face with my sleeve. It was gross. Snot and tears. I didn't care. I looked at the empty room. I imagined Ben here, buying the furniture, picking out the linoleum, thinking of me. He didn't leave me nothing. He left me everything. Richard used money to control people. Ben used money to set me free. This house was built with hush money, but it was filled with love. That's more than the Whitfield estate ever had. If you're still watching this, I want to thank you. I know this is a heavy story, but I promise we are almost at the end. If you want to see how this all wraps up, please hit that subscribe button. Turn Turn on notifications so you don't miss the final chapter. Drop a like if this story resonated with you. And please, tell me in the comments what would you do with this house. I read every single one. Peace doesn't last long in the Whitfield family. You know that feeling when your chest finally unclenches and then the world punches you in the gut? My phone started vibrating against the linoleum floor. It rattled loudly, like an angry insect buzzing in the quiet room. Keisha froze mid-sentence. The air between us shifted instantly from safe to dangerous. I grabbed my iPhone off the dusty floorboards. The screen was blindingly bright in the dim afternoon light of the Key West living room. Notifications were piling up, pushing each other out of the way to be seen. 48 missed calls. 49. 50. All from brother. The little red notification badges looked like blood splatters on the glass. Instantly, my hands went cold. You have to understand, Julian never calls. He texts his assistant, who then texts me. This wasn't a check-in. This was a full-blown distress signal. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Thump, thump, thump. The waves crashed outside, but the sound was drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. There was a small red bubble on the voicemail icon. I looked at Keisha. She was watching me, her eyes wide and waiting for an explanation. I tapped the screen. My thumb slipped on the sweat. I was shaking so bad. I held the phone to my ear. I expected screaming. I expected demands about the deed or the trust fund. But I heard static first. Heavy, wet breathing on the other end of the line. Then Julian's voice came through the speaker. Blythe! He wasn't yelling. He sounded wrecked. Completely broken. His voice was actually shaking. I went back to the townhouse. I went into the attic alone. My knees hit the floor harder. I found the loose floorboard under the insulation, behind the old Christmas decorations. I found the other letters, Blythe, the ones Dad hid from Mom. I stopped breathing. The air in the Key West house suddenly felt too thick to inhale. I read the bank transfers, monthly payments to Ben for 18 years. Dad wasn't a saint. You were right about everything. I looked at the peeling paint on the wall. I felt dizzy, like the room was spinning. I remember how Julian used to look at me like I was dirt on his shoe. Now he was the one drowning. I never thought I'd hear those words come out of his mouth. Not in a million years. Mom is screaming downstairs. She doesn't know I have them in my pocket right now. He paid Ben off to keep us quiet. He paid him to leave us. It was the validation I had killed myself for. But hearing it hurt. It hurt so much. A single tear dropped onto my phone screen, splashing right over the end call button. I don't know what to do. The lawyers are already calling the house phone. Please, Blythe, just call me back. I'm scared. The message cut off. Silence returned to the room, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the black glass reflecting my own shocked face. The boy who had everything was realizing it was all built on a lie. The golden child's crown had just fallen off and shattered. The silence in that little house was heavy. It felt like the air pressure had dropped. Keisha was sitting on the three-legged table, staring at me. She didn't say a word. I looked down at my phone. The screen was a mess of red notifications. My hand was shaking. Just a little tremor. Like I'd had too much coffee. You know that feeling when you're standing on a ledge? I couldn't just sit there. I pressed call back and put it on speaker. It rang once, twice, then a click. Julian sounded like he'd been screaming for days. His voice was raw, raspy. Blythe? Don't hang up. Please, just listen. I sat down on the linoleum floor. It was cool against my legs. I could hear papers rustling in the background. Or maybe he was crying. I found it, he whispered. I went into the attic. I found the coat. I knew exactly which coat he meant. The gray wool trench coat. Dad wore it to every funeral. He looked like a noir detective. Julian took a shaky breath. I was looking for loose change. I felt something hard in the lining. It was a key, a brass safety deposit box key from Harris Bank. He went there this morning. He forced the box open. A notification pinged on my screen. An incoming image from Julian. It was a photograph of a faded document, a bank statement from 1999. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The typewriter font was sharp. July 14th, 1999. $250,000. I zoomed in on the screen. My eyes were stinging. The timestamp was 2014 p.m., a Tuesday afternoon. The payee was Benjamin Whitfield. The memo line said, "Consulting fee." I wish I was joking. Who pays $250,000 for consulting? Have you ever seen a number that just makes you sick to your stomach? Julian's voice cracked over the phone. There were letters, Blythe? Agreements. Richard wasn't protecting Mom, he was protecting his wallet. If he divorced Eleanor, he'd lose half the estate. Julian was the heir, I was the mistake. Richard paid Ben to disappear. He paid him to sign away his rights. Ben took the money. He bought this house. He bought his freedom. I looked around the dusty room, the linoleum, the cheap curtains. This house was built on hush money. Richard paid for my future. It was a business decision, Julian said. He sounded hollow, empty. You were just a liability to him. Can you imagine hearing that? Your brother telling you that you were just a business expense? I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. My father sold my relationship with my biological father for $250,000 and a roof over his head. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more stories to tell. And some of them are even worse than this one. Like this video if you made it to the end. And drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done. I read every single one. So that's the receipt. $250,000 to make my existence disappear. I stared at that bank statement until the numbers blurred. Julian was still on the line, breathing hard, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just felt tired. Deep down in my bones, I looked around the living room of this house. The linoleum was honest. The wood was dusty. It felt real. It wasn't built on a legacy of lies. It was built on the payoff money. I wish I was joking, but the irony is actually painful. Richard paid for my sanctuary. He bought me a way out. I looked at Keisha. She was sitting on the three-legged table, watching me with Ben's eyes. She didn't look disgusted by the money. She just looked sad. She knew her dad. She knew he kept every penny because it was meant for me. I told Julian I have to go. He started yelling about lawyers and accounts. I didn't care. I pressed the red button. The screen went black. Silence. Finally, I dropped the phone on the couch. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. It was like the adrenaline was finally draining out of me. Keisha jumped off the table and walked over. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around me. We stood there in the middle of the empty living room. The air smelled like salt and old wood. I could hear the ocean through the screen door. It was the first time in weeks I could actually breathe. You know that feeling when you've been holding your breath underwater and you finally break the surface? That was this moment. We decided to go outside. The sun was starting to go down. We walked out the back door and down the wooden path to the dock. The water was calm. The sky was turning that pinkish-orange color you only see in postcards. I sat on the edge of the dock and let my legs dangle. The water was cold against my ankles. I looked back at the house. It was small, it was crooked, but it was mine. Not the Whitfield estate, not the townhouse on Fullerton. This. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had 50 missed calls. I ignored them all. I opened a new message to Julian. I typed 4 words. I love you. I'll see you when you're ready to come here. I hit send. Then I turned the phone off completely. The screen went dark. I slipped it into my pocket. I'm not going back to Chicago. Not yet. I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna figure out who I am when nobody is watching. I'm going to sit on this dock and watch the sunset. I watched the sun dip below the horizon. It turned the water into gold. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like salt and freedom. I don't know who I am yet, but for the first time, I know whose daughter I'm not. If a story hit you as hard as it hit me to tell it, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have a feeling this isn't the end of the drama. Like this video if you made it to the end. And drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. I read every single one.